comes around, I think we know how the Montreal Canadiens are going to play the trade deadline. They won't be adding, as they say. Worst team in the NHL right now. The Arizona Coyotes jumped them in points percentage with their win last night. And, I was at the game last night, and I ran in to our good friend, Mr. Gorton, and I asked him, when you're at these games, what are you looking for? Like, obviously, you're building the team. You know what you need in terms of holes in the lineup, different positions, different skill sets, whatever it may be. But I said, when you're actually at the game, like, what are you watching for? He said, well, it's hard. He said, this season, it's not just not going well. It's over. This season is not going to be a playoff team. So for young players, he said it's very hard to get motivated when you know what the future is, you know where you stand, and you haven't been in the league very long. It's hard to get up for games and to get motivated. So he said, I like what I saw tonight against the Bruins, the feistiness, the chippiness, guys really engaged with the play. He said that stuff matters. Each, do you see it that way? What do you make of that comment?
I completely agree, and I would say this. Everybody's watching, especially at the National Hockey League level. I mean, everybody's watching. Scouts are watching, other teams are watching, they're taking note. Right now, if you're a team that's looking for players, you're really watching the Montreal Canadiens because you're looking to see if you can get in there and vulture in and grab something that you need.
Yeah.
You just talked about the Carolina Hurricanes, right? They're probably keeping an eye on the Canadiens and seeing if there's somebody in there that they like and that maybe they could poach from the Habs and add to a really good team in Carolina. So I would say this, Johnny, and, you lived it as a player. I would say, like, for the players, when the manager says, well, the season's over and it's hard to get motivated, if you're a young player with something to prove, you better get motivated. You better get motivated fast because one thing is for sure. As I said, people are watching, and they'll be quick to put a line through your name if you don't go out there and play hard and try to show what you can do. So I think there's a lot of reasons for these players on the Montreal Canadiens to come in there and be motivated to play hard. They may not win every night. We haven't won very much this year. They got a lot of problems. It's been well documented. But for those individual players, people are watching. They better get motivated to come and play every night. And to your point, Jackie, that's what I'm sure Jeff liked last night, was a feisty nature even in defeat.
Yeah, I think where Gortz is coming from, if you're a player like Brendan Gallagher or Josh Anderson, like an established player with a good contract, maybe for those guys, not quite as much tangibly on the line. But a lot of Montreal players are new to the NHL or relatively young in their career. Like Cole Caulfield has a lot to play for. Show that you can play in the NHL and score. Nick Suzuki's got the big contract. He's going to be a great player, but you have a lot to play for to grow and play against other teams' top lines. You can find motivation on crappy teams by being selfish within the team concept. So whatever it is you're trying to establish, whether you're Laurent Dauphin trying to establish that you belong in the NHL, whether you're Cole Caulfield saying, I want to be on the power play in the NHL, whether you're Romanov saying, I'm a top four, like whatever it is, and you can motivate and push yourself with those individual goals so long as you play them with the team concept in mind. But I played on some bad teams. Like, I know what it's like to be there in February, like the year is over. Can I get to 20 goals? Can I get to 40 points? Can I get to 60 points? Can I be a player that this team wants to build with in the future? Because you can't just pack it in, even though you have a contract that's guaranteed. And maybe more than ever in that market, one that I know well, the Montreal Canadiens fans and the media there will take note of how everyone acts, behaves, and plays these last few months. Because the Montreal Canadiens have a certain gravitas that comes with playing there. There's a responsibility more than other organizations because of their history. And the fans, I know they're going to be terrible. They might have the worst team in the league this year. But if they just mail it in, if they don't see that engagement, that buy into the game, whether they win or not, then everyone will take notice of it. Everyone will hear about it, and it's going to make it even worse. So, yeah, they may not win games, but just playing hard, being engaged, being invested, and then push yourself with some individual goals. Nothing selfish about that. It makes you play better, and that's all anyone's after. So lots and lots to play for. Don't think this lets them off the hook if you're a Montreal Canadiens player. Not at all.
And, I would just add one other thing. You talked about the guys who have the contracts that are established guys, Gallagher, Anderson, these guys. A message to them, because I told you the story today in the run-up today, and I've told this story before. Bruins-Islanders game, late 90s. Bruins were bad. They ended up picking first that year, taking Joe Thornton. Islanders weren't that hot either. Afternoon game late in the season. A lot of young players on both teams. For veteran guys, not a big reason to play, right? The best player, the guy who worked the hardest in that game, Ray Bourque, because he was a pro. And when people watched, they look, they say Ray Bourque, even in a game that doesn't mean much, he's a pro. For Josh Anderson, for Brendan Gallagher, you got a lot less going for you than Ray Bourque did, believe me. Go and play hard every night because you know what it is? You know, there's contract situations, right? Johnny, and you know this. Teams are looking at these guys. Do I want to acquire? Like Montreal might be looking to unload one of these guys. Sure. Somebody down the road might say, hey, listen, I watched, Josh Anderson when you guys were struggling. He wasn't really engaged. Why do I want to take on his contract? I have a good thing here. I need guys that are in all the time. So that's another little thing. As I said, people are always watching, especially now when it's so available all over the place. That's the thing that Jeff Gorton is looking at right now, too. Who are the guys who are engaged? Who are the guys who are coming to play night after night despite the circumstances?
That's well said by you. I do have to follow up on Brendan Gallagher. I know that he's a heart and soul player in Montreal. I know he loves playing in Montreal. Is there any chance you think that he moves at the deadline? Or is that a player that you think
isn't it, Johnny?
There?
I mean, I don't know if anybody's taken on that deal. I love the guy, but I think he's got a lot of miles on him already, and you're taking on a lot of contract.
I think it's year 1 of 6, EJ. And, he's almost 30 years old. Yeah, of course you love him when he plays so well. And, when healthy, he can still be an effective player, but he has a hard time staying healthy. He's been battered around because he does play so hard. So, Jackie, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think they could just say, even if we wanted virtually nothing back, just take the contract and the player. I'm not sure there'll be a lot of takers because of the term. Not the player, but because of the term.
The Montreal Canadiens to get practice in that Chris Weidman actually laced up his skates for the first time in 15 days by going to a local outdoor rink. He said a few moments after he got on the ice, a young kid came up to him and said, hey, you're pretty good. Where do you play? Well, he and Montreal, they'll be on the ice tonight against the Boston Bruins, many of them playing for the first time since December. So let's welcome in our Montreal insider, Eric Engels. Let's begin off the ice because how is the GM search going in Montreal?
Well, before I get to the GM search, I have to agree with you. That opening was fantastic. And I also get distracted by pizza, as you could see. Yeah. I think, as far as the GM search is concerned, I think the Canadiens really want to get this wrapped up before the end of the month. They won't rush to do it. It's been an exhaustive process. There's been some names interviewed that potentially some people weren't aware of or weren't thinking of. I think first interviews are wrapping up early this week, and they're hoping to get the second interviews done with candidates that are moving forward to the next round and inevitably name one, potentially when they get back from this road trip, hopefully sooner. In their case, I think they want to get it done as soon as possible. So we'll see where it all goes, Carolyn. A lot of good names on that list. Patrick was up there. John Sedgwick is there, who works with the Canadiens already. You have Daniel Briere, Matthew Darche, Roberto Luongo, Emily Castonguay, Diane Silva. It goes on and on. It's a long list. So let's see how it goes.
Okay, looking on the ice tonight, what do you expect? Because it still was hard for Dominic Ducharme to put an NHL lineup together.
Yeah, I think if you're Dominic Ducharme, you want to see some good energy from your team. Obviously, the timing's going to take time. I'm looking at one player in specific, Carolyn. I want to look at what Jeff Petrie does because so far this season, he hasn't looked like himself. I don't think you go from 3 straight 40-point seasons plus to all of a sudden you're no longer a good player in the NHL. We know what this guy can do. He's got to get his feet moving, get that passing game going, stop worrying about everything that's going on around him, focus on himself, and he should be fine.
Great. Eric, appreciate the time. Enjoy the game.
You too.
And pleased to be joined now by Anthony Stewart and Justin Bourne. And Stewie, what's it like when you're coming off a long break and you're getting back on the ice?
I'm getting tired just thinking about it. And I use the multiplier 3. It's 3 games, 3 days for every game that you miss. And I think for this Montreal Canadiens team, it's going to take 2, 3, 4 games to get back up to speed. So I expect some sloppy hockey tonight. But at the same time, they got to find a reason to compete and find something to play for as well.
Let's talk about the GM search and opening up in Montreal and reports that Patrick Waugh has been interviewed for that vacancy. Of course, he's made a huge impact not only on that franchise, but in the hockey history books. One of the greatest goalies of all time, Hall of Famer, 4-time Stanley Cup champion. Great player on the ice. What about a fit as a general manager?
Well, first of all, certainly one of the most recognizable names you can have in that province. Patrick Roy is synonymous with hockey there, quite frankly. So I think it's great. He got an opportunity to interview. We'll see where it goes. One thing about Patrick, he'll tell you what he thinks. He's not going to hold back. He wears his heart on his sleeve. Some people have drawn conclusions that may not play well for him. I don't necessarily agree. I think that Jeff Gordon is really going to be in complete control of that team for a while. I think they end up with somebody like Patrick, or maybe even somebody younger that hasn't been a GM before, and there's a little bit of a toolage period there. And that goes on for a year or 2 or 3. And I expect Jeff to do the bulk of the work in terms of actually managing the team. But that's my opinion. That's not what they're saying necessarily.
Stu, what is your opinion on this? Obviously, no surprise that Patrick Roy's name is in and around the GM conversation right now, but he's been interviewed. What do you think the next steps are as far as his name goes?
Yeah, I think it makes great sense. And Brian and I see this in much the same way. If I'm Jeff Gordon, I think optically, from a almost public relations point of view, it makes good sense to interview Patrick Roy, to consider him as part of the mix, and certainly embrace that interview process with an open mind, because I think there'd be a lot of push, there'd be a lot of a very significant voice among the fan base for Patrick Roy to really, succeed to that position. Like Brian, I don't know if that's necessarily the best choice, because at just about every other level, apart from a managerial level as an NHLer, Patrick has demonstrated, yes, a great passion and a flair for playing the game, but he's also demonstrated he's got, somewhat of a short fuse and a proclivity to kind of do things in his own way. Anything he does has to have his stamp on it, my way or the highway type approach. I think that would give somebody like Jeff Gordon a healthy dose of pause before he kind of steps into a hire like that. So I'm not surprised that Patrick's considered part of the interview process. I would be surprised if at the end of this process that Patrick ends up being the chosen successor to Marc Bergevin.
We saw the names of potential candidates being interviewed for this position. They had Elliot Friedman on. You had Elliot Friedman on earlier. What were your takeaways from maybe some insight that he shared about the process and how this thing plays out in the next month or so?
Well, I think they're going to take their time, and I think that list is really truncated, to be honest with you, for the number of people that I'm told they're going to put through the process. A name that's really interesting to me, though, and I'm not sure he'd want to do it at this stage in his career or his life, is Roberto Luongo. He just, to me, feels like a guy that has the right temperament. He's learning, so to speak, since he's retired, working for the Florida Panthers, as you see right there, as a special advisor to the GM. He's a guy that comes, he's a very funny individual. Everybody knows that from his Twitter exploits, or alleged Twitter exploits. But the reality is that anybody I've ever had a deep discussion with about him speaks very, very highly of him. His intellect, number one, but more importantly, his leadership, number two. And you don't always get that from goaltenders. Patrick Roy was a leader himself as a goalie, but not in the way that Roberto Luongo was. A completely different way, as a matter of fact. Both beneficial to the club, but different styles. I feel like Roberto, who is not a friend in full transparency for the viewers, is just somebody that I believe would do an awesome job.
All right, we shall see what Jeff Gordon does moving forward.